congregate to the greatest toy line in community, ever growing, ever changing. As we collect and adapt these figures to our own imaginations and embrace the fun, there's much to learn, especially if you're new to Mythics. Hello and welcome to another episode of New to Mythics, episode 16. I am honored by my guest, David Williams. Welcome, David Williams. Thank you very, very much for taking the time on a Sunday night to be on my show. Thank you.
Oh, hey, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. I'm honored. Joe was the one that Joe Martinez is like, have you talked to David Williams? Have you talked? I go, I don't know him. I mean, I would love to. I've seen his work. He's an amazing dude. But, it's kind of weird and awkward for me to just send someone a message and, hey, can I, would you be on my show? So thank you to Joe for maybe kind of bridging us or getting us together a little bit. And I've been seeing you in the Allegiance chat too. So, you've been sharing some stuff that you're working on. And I felt a little bit more comfortable to say hi.
Like the Legion's chat is a great place to get to know everybody. That's how I got to know Joe Martinez, was through Legion's chat, and then we started just video chatting throughout the week, just talking about customs and just life in general.
Yeah, he's a great dude. Yeah,
absolutely.
He's a great guy. So this show is basically, it's called New to Mythics, and it's kind of like a welcoming show for people that are new. Everyone was new at some point to the line, and I'm always curious about people's journey to becoming a fan of Mythics and to being in the community and the cabal and all that stuff. So if you don't mind, let's hop in our DeLorean and go back in time to when you were a young man on the streets of Arizona or Nevada or Arizona?
Yeah, Tucson, Arizona.
Tucson, Arizona. So tell me, what did you collect when you were a kid? What were you into? Stuff like that. Like, what kind of toys were you?
I was like obsessed with action figures my whole life. I never went through that cool phase where I didn't like toys. I was like, I gotta chase girls and play sports. I was super nerd my whole life. I was really into the 3 3/4 GI Joes. Mm-hmm. Pretty much my whole childhood up until like the toxic figures, the real neon colored ones. That's when toys started getting a little more interesting. There was just a different line for every property, and I was into all of them, everything I could get my hands on. But the big ones were GI Joes, Thundercats, the Secret Wars stuff I was really into.
Yes.
And then Star Wars. Star Wars was my first love. I had acquired a box. I had acquired a box of Star Wars toys before I'd seen the movie. Mm-hmm. And the two in particular that I loved turned out to be C-3PO and Chewbacca. And to me, it was I got this awesome gold robot that could fly and this werewolf man with a gun. So when I finally saw the movie and I realized that C-3PO was the butler,
right?
Chewbacca was the pet dog.
Yeah, he was kind of the assistant and the sidekick and the butler assistant that got abused by the space pirate.
But even to this day, those are two of my favorite characters from Star Wars because I look back so fondly on the action figures and how much fun I had with them. And then in the 90s, I kind of just stuck with it, whatever was coming out. And then when Spawn was released was when I was like, cool, these are adult toys. Mm-hmm. I wasn't as embarrassed to have them because right before that I was collecting like the Toy Biz Marvel stuff,
Yeah.
like
Those are
the
nice figures.
Punisher. Yeah, like the Punisher, Captain America, Iron Man setup.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a bunch of those. But then when Spawn came out, it was like toy hunting became a thing. I was
Yes.
driving, so I was able to like drive to Toys R Us and try and
Yes.
catch, try and find Party Angela or, whatever was out at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I pretty much I collected that stuff for years, like
Yeah.
super into it. And then in Toy Fair magazine, they started to talk about the sculptors, and that's when they started to talk about the Four Horsemen. So
Mm-hmm.
that was my introduction to them, was through Toy Fair magazine, like many other people, and and it was just you just associated them with cool stuff. So anytime that
Yeah.
they would sculpt something or offer their abilities to any other toy line, it
Mm-hmm.
was like it was like a must get, because it's like
Yeah.
these are the guys who made Spawn.
Right. Yeah. I remember seeing their name, Four Horsemen, and it was like so mysterious to me. Like I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know what they look like. I didn't know, it was a shadowy group of these badass toy sculptors or designers. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know anything about them, but
Yeah.
I knew that they were definitely a creative force in all
Yeah.
these different toy lines for sure. Yeah, Spawn, it really kind of was a just a uh, incredible, like huge jump, I think, in toys at that time. There was not a lot of kind of adult. I think NECA was finally coming around, but I
Yeah.
think it was a good time for that to be there for us at our age to start. Like, whoa, the Redeemer was just like one of the coolest figures I'd seen.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that line, I mean, I'm sure somebody will have a more specific moment in time, but I personally think that the Spawn action figures were the when action figures changed forever.
Mm-hmm. I
Like
agree.
you expected every toy company needed to have newer, better sculpts, and they needed to
Yes.
have better paints and just a more interesting approach to action figures. I mean, I believe that's how we got like Toy Biz, Marvel Legends,
Mm-hmm.
when they started adding all that
Yeah.
crazy articulation, and the
Yeah.
sculpts were all unique. But I think it was from that point forward, everybody was like into this,
Yeah. It was kind of like
one.
the toy companies grew with us,
Yeah, it
and
was like,
and it evolved and developed and realized, that we want better than the
yeah,
5-point articulation. We want better sculpts and better articulation and cool designs and creative stuff. You
yeah,
know.
absolutely. Yeah, I that time period was when everything changed for size wise too. It went from 3 3/4 figures to 1/6 scale, um, or 1/12, like immediately. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was like everybody had to be 6 7 inches to
Mm-hmm.
just you know keep up. And there was McFarlane Toys were doing all the movies. They did the X-Files stuff, and then
Yes, I remember that.
just like anything you saw in the toy aisle was just that was interesting was a McFarlane figure.
Yeah, it was almost like they took risks, like
Yeah.
you said, like they did X-Files and stuff, and like a regular, like a Hasbro Mattel, they probably wouldn't even think about doing a TV show or
Hmm.
make the kind of toys that Spawn and McFarlane were making at the time.
Yeah.
It was a cool. It was, I think it kind of made collecting cool.
Yeah.
It made the figures like cool to collect.
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, it was like that like bridge into being an adult collector that
Mm-hmm.
didn't feel as weird as being like a a 17-year-old that was collecting Marvel toys, or
Yeah,
Spider-Man toys.
yeah.
But yeah,
So
either way, I never stopped. So
I love that. I love that because a lot of people are like, yeah, I discovered girls and music and partying and stuff, but you're like, no,
hmm.
I always collected. So I think that that's cool.
Yeah. And I got into music in my late teens, early 20s, and I was just, you know, I was the drummer with Star Wars toys, you know, and
Nothing wrong
and
with it.
it just never fazed anyone. They were like, "Oh, it's David. He's into comic books and the art."
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff kept me, you know, going to where I'm at now. Like as a tattooer, I was into like the counterculture lifestyle. So I was like, I gotta do something cool. I want to do tattoos.
Mhm.
And, you know, I took my background in drawing and collecting comic books and action figures and just brought that over into tattooing. And it's a totally different medium. You basically, you know, you're going to want to relearn how to draw before you start tattooing, but
So it's a different type of
absolutely.
drawing?
Yeah, but it helps to have an artistic background to
I
become a
bet.
tattooer, you know,
Yeah.
um, just for the sake of the art of it, as opposed to just the technical side of it,
Hmm.
which is
So
a whole other thing.
I bet when you were younger, still you were into Spawn, and then maybe it progressed into other toys.
Yeah.
What were some of the other things that you were into toy wise?
Well,
Any other lines or?
it was funny because I once, so I remember like the birth of the internet, like eBay. And once that became a thing, it was like I was going back and I was trying to collect the old toys I had. So
Mhm.
I spent a lot of money reacquiring a lot of the old He-Man stuff. 2000X He-Man was another one that I was super into. Um, and yeah, it was like reacquiring old toys and then just moving forward with, again, kind of anything that came out would I would find interesting, you
Mhm.
know, just because it's like these new action figures. And again,
Yeah.
I did the Toy Biz Marvel Legends. I collected a lot of those. Um, again, Masters of the Universe 2000X, super into that. And
Was
then,
there?
go ahead.
I was going to say, was there like was there a certain type of characters that you would be attracted to, or was it like whatever you thought was cool?
It was kind of whatever I thought was cool, but I've always liked heroic characters. So like
Mhm.
when it came to Masters of the Universe, it was always like He-Man and his friends. But I had a couple of friends growing up, and we would all kind of like choose characters.
Mhm.
So there were certain ones that I just chose because that was my option, and then it stayed with me. Like I'm one of those people that loves Stratos
I
because
love Stratus. Yeah.
I loved that figure
Hmm.
when I was a kid, and then the 2000X Stratos is arguably like one of my all-time favorite figures. Um, and yeah, aesthetically it was cool. I never really liked any of like the gross out toys, you know,
Hmm.
like I was never into like real violent, gross looking toys.
Hmm.
I was really into the Ninja Turtles. I forgot to even bring those up. Um, but even then it was like I was real kind of choosy with those
Hmm.
because I didn't want Muckman or um, any of the real gross looking figures. Like I
Hmm.
wanted the turtles and I wanted Casey, and I was really big into Wingnut and Screw Loose. I thought those
Yeah.
were cool figures.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
I
turtles
remember those
carried
too.
me out for a long time too. That was another thing I collected for years.
Yeah. I remember as a kid. I don't know about you, but I would get like, I would get a figure for my birthday or, Christmas or something. And I remember, like you said, you had C3PO and Chewbacca. And I remember my mom had taken me to a park and she had bought me Death Star droid.
Uh
And
huh.
I don't think I'd even seen Star Wars yet, but I was just so intrigued by this robot. And like, I didn't know the story. Apparently he has
Mm-hmm.
no story, but like your imagination, like fills in all the blanks. Like you said, you didn't
Yeah,
know what C3PO could do, but he was just this cool robot that could fly and do kind of amazing things.
yeah. That's what a lot of the GI Joe stuff was like that for me. It was just like I liked the character. I watched the cartoon and stuff, but I don't think I wasn't a big lore nerd, you know,
Mhm.
like um up until Star Wars. Like Star Wars, I had to play Star Wars the way Star Wars was,
Mhm.
you know. Um
Once you
and
learned
that
and saw the
yeah,
movies. So.
yeah, and that kind of goes in, I mean it goes further into like the mythic stuff is like I really enjoy the lore, but I love the ability to have like builders and stuff like that
Mhm.
because and that's what kind of got me into the customizing aspect of it. But for the most part, it was like that was my entry with like I mixed toy lines when I was a kid. They didn't all have to be the same scale or same size. It
Mhm.
was like He-Man and you know
Yes,
He-Man and Lion-O could be in the same place. You know.
there was no rules as a kid. You know,
Hmm.
you what you had is what you played with, and
Yeah,
scale and stuff like that wasn't really a factor. I mean,
yeah.
for me, it wasn't. You know, they would all Sectars and Lion-O and He-Man, and
Hmm.
they would all,
Oh yeah, sectars were. I love sectars.
yeah,
Those were
just cool
cool.
stuff.
Those I had no attachment to any. I didn't know there was a show or if there was a show or anything like that. I just they were just cool bug guys.
Yeah.
I was never into vehicles for anything, so it was like I just got the toys, you know,
Mhm.
like the action figures. Another one I was really into was Visionaries.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Those were those
With
were
the
really cool.
holograms.
Yeah, one of my favorite character on the TV show was Feral, and he came with a big vehicle. So it was like to get him, I had to save up and buy this huge vehicle that I was never going to play with just to get the guy with the
Yeah.
wolf chest emblem, you know?
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, those were a big part of my, you know, as
Those
we're
were very
talking about
cool.
them, I'm just remembering all the different things. Me and Curtis Ackerman were talking about it in
Yeah.
Legion's chat. I was also really into Cops and Crooks.
Yeah. I
Those were
was
cool
listening to you
toys.
guys talk about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually ended up picking one up. I found one on eBay. So,
Did you? Yeah, I
uh,
remember you guys were researching,
yeah,
looking up
during
the
Legion's
different.
chat, we were just looking them all up. But yeah,
Yeah.
I ended up picking one up just for nostalgia. But it's not something I'll end up collecting again. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. It was a good time, and I think I'm with you on the lore thing. It's like it's nice when there's lore, but I don't need it. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It's like imagination is a muscle that you always have. You know,
Yeah,
you can invent your own thing or have nothing at all. You know, it's whatever you think is cool or interesting or fun. It
yeah,
doesn't need a story for you to pick it up and buy it or play with it or whatever.
absolutely. Yeah, that's how a lot of those '80s '90s toy lines were just like. I mean, they were that was the greatest time for action figures, in my
It's the
opinion.
greatest
It was
time, the
like
golden age.
there was just random toys that I would play with. Like I didn't know anything about Battle Beasts, but I had a ton of them, and I played with them because they were small enough to like build rock houses, you know, out of they were structurally sound enough to stay, you know, up.
Yeah,
So you'd be like, oh, cool, I made this like 2-story little castle for my Battle Beasts.
yeah,
But anything bigger, you know, they would just fall over.
yeah. It was fun back then. You know, I would put some figures in my pocket and go out into the backyard or go to my grandma's
Hmm.
house, on the weekends and
Yeah,
just have some adventures outside.
yeah. I was also really into. We had a pool when I was growing up, so I was always into the water figures because I could bring them outside and put them in the water. But in the same way, I was never into the snow figures because we never get snow here.
Right? You're like, what's snow? What
So
is
like,
that?
yeah, so any of the Arctic
What am I
stuff,
going to
I
do
was
with
like,
that?
yeah, exactly. So yeah, desert stuff, pool stuff. I was always into
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I remember I got Snow Job, the snow
Uh
uh,
huh.
guy from GI Joe, and
Oh yeah.
I'm from California, the hottest part, and I'm like, what am I
Yeah.
gonna? He's got skis. What is he? What's he gonna do with these things?
Yep.
I thought it
I
was a cool
actually
figure, but
something I actually got in trouble for as a kid. Um, so that my snow figure that I had that this happened with was Blizzard from GI Joe. He was the other snow guy. He came with like a little like you this like backpack, but it had handles and you could put the skis on the bottom of it. And we used to have the dry laundry detergent from like Price Club, like the big
Mhm.
boxes of
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
And I would play with him in the laundry detergent because it looked like snow. And my mom would yell at me every time. She was like, "Get out of there!" And like, "Don't touch your eyes." I didn't understand that
Right.
was like it's just
Yeah.
concentrated soap, you know.
Probably
But
smelled
it was
good.
the yeah, but it was the closest thing to snow that I
I
played with.
never thought about doing that. I was like he was like, going over invisible mountains and stuff.
Yeah,
Like I had no idea what to do with.
yeah.
I never
That
thought
was
about using that. That's pretty smart.
my only snow. I remember it snowed one time in I think it was 1987, and at the time, um, I what did I get for it was on Christmas Day, and I got Bionic Six figures
Mhm.
and the Cops and Crooks motorcycle. So the one thing that I kept doing with this Bionic Six figure, which was all die cast,
Mhm.
was like the deepest snow. I think it was a couple inches at most, but I would just drop him from high up because he would make an indentation of himself because they were so
Mhm.
heavy. So, and then the motorcycle, I was just tearing through the snow, like making tracks, like this is
Yeah.
so cool. And then by like 10 a.m., it was all melted. So,
Right. It's over. It's
yep,
done.
that was
It's
my
gone.
snow for,
Then it's slush.
yeah, a moment in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Good old days.
Oh, yeah.
So through high school, you still collected
Hmm.
into your young adult life. You
Yeah,
had.
the high school was all the Power of the Force, uh, Star Wars stuff.
Mhm.
And we would go right after school, we'd go to Walmart and go check out all the, see if we could catch a brown vested Luke or a long
I
lightsaber Darth
remember
Vader,
that. Yes, I
Yep,
remember that brown vest. I didn't
yep.
realize that it was a thing. I think I'd gone to a comic shop, and because that the Jedi Luke is one of my favorite figures in any
Yeah,
in any you know iteration, and
me
so
too.
I had the black, the basic black one, and I saw the brown vest on the on one of the pegs in the comic shop, and I think he was asking like $90,
Yeah,
which back then was like $1,000 for me. I'm like, there's no way I'll ever get that, but I just thought that was
it
super
was
cool.
it was crazy. So that I have the brown vested Luke,
Nice.
but I opened everything. Like I
Mhm.
never left anything packaged. Um, and then when I was 17, I started working at Toys R Us,
What?
and
Wow.
yeah, and I worked there for that was my first job. I worked there for eight
That is
years.
awesome.
So
Wow.
any of the variants that I was looking for, I was usually able to find. But even then, it was like if I could sell it to the comic shop and make a couple of bucks,
Mhm.
that was fine. But if it wasn't something super rare that I could make a couple bucks off of, I would just open it. Like I
Yeah.
just all the
Yeah.
Star Wars stuff. I was convinced that none of that was going to be worth money. Like I knew I was like the 70s and 80s Star Wars stuff is worth money because it was old. Whereas
Yes.
like this stuff,
Old.
it's like you saw the production numbers of these things, especially
Right.
working at a toy store. You just saw how much of this was made
Tons.
that you're like, this isn't going to be valuable.
Yeah.
And it's funny because my Power of the Force stuff all ended up in a tote that I gave to a friend who had an 8-year-old, and he
Mhm.
just loved them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
I
So
wasn't weird
cool.
about opening my toys. I
I
opened them all.
I totally admire that, dude. I'm kind of back and forth. I love to see the designing and the engineering of the figure,
Hmm.
and and if you don't open it, you're not you're only seeing a few facets of the
Yeah,
figure. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So
And I forgot who said it, but for a lot of these toys, like outside of Mythics, it's like the fun kind of ends after you open it. Because some of it's kind of smoke and mirrors. You see a lot of double
mhm,
joints, and you see a lot of this fantastic sculpt and paint, and then you get it out, and it wasn't what you were expecting, or it's a
mhm,
little bit more cumbersome than you thought it was going to be.
right.
Um, and so It's actually kind of gotten me out of collecting a lot of other lines,
Mhm.
because it is. I mean, every time I've opened a Marvel Legend, I'm like, man, they still do the waist like that, and the
Mhm.
legs barely bend, and like it's just a little disappointing when you thought
Yes.
you got these double jointed characters that can't really bend their arms,
Mhm.
you know. Um,
Yeah.
but then there are also like these gems that stand out, like the '90s NECA movie turtles.
Mhm.
Are those are I think that those are some of the best action figures I own.
I
Um,
need to get
most of
those.
the
I don't have those.
most of the NECA Mirage stuff is really really good too.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm just looking up. I have a couple of the big Mondo turtles too, and those are really spectacular toys.
I don't have any of
But
the Mondo stuff. I never
Mondo's
collected that line.
Mondo's expensive. I
Mhm.
got those turtles one by one as they were being released, so I think they were
Mhm.
like 120 a piece.
That's
Um,
not too bad. That's less than a hot dog.
no, yeah, and they're huge. I mean,
Mhm.
they're massive, and they're real sturdy, and they come with a ton of accessories. So that was something that like I kept all the packaging. It's like maybe for I can't see myself doing it, but like for a rainy day,
Right.
I could repack it and sell it for
Yeah.
400 bucks a turtle if I wanted. But
Yeah.
those are I think those are real special in my collection because they weren't hugely popular. Like it wasn't like the He-Man stuff.
Right.
Like the He-Man stuff now from Mondo is so popular that again production numbers are higher. You can get it for a little bit more than retail if you do decide to go back. You know,
Yeah. That trap jaw caught
considering
my eye.
yeah. But I mean, retail is also 250 bucks. You're like,
Right.
I don't want to spend 250 bucks on it in the first place, let alone the aftermarket, which is going to be
Right.
300 or 350.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I have a pretty substantial turtles collection now as well.
That's awesome. So 8 years at Toys R Us.
Yeah,
Wow.
man. It was, it
I would
was,
I would have innumerable amounts of more stuff than I already have. I
oh yeah,
think.
man. That, the collection I acquired working at Toys R Us really got me through that period of time before you're a grown up,
Mhm.
but you're still in your 20s and you have to pay your bills.
Right. Before
Um,
true reality really.
yeah, but still having enough money to buy toys. But yeah, I mean, there was a point where it's like I had so much stuff, and that's when I have an eBay account, which I barely use now, other than buying stuff. But I did end up with a lot of stuff working at Toys R Us. Um, but it was also one of the most fun jobs I ever had. Like
I
I met
bet.
some of my current best friends when
Mhm.
I worked there in 1998.
That's awesome.
So I still talk to these people to this day.
Yeah, that's cool. So had you always drawn your whole life? Had you been into art like your whole life?
Yeah, yeah. I was into art as a kid. I would just make up my own characters, and then I got into the turtles and other comic books, and I just drew superheroes. And then I got into tattooing, and then you only draw tattoos, which
Hmm.
is like all the things you've seen a million times. The
Right.
sparrows and anchors and
I was
roses,
about
and
to say some
it's
kind of
that's
bird, some
yeah,
kind
that's
of.
hugely important to tattooing is to learn how to draw that stuff.
Now,
Um,
I had a question about that. Like, um, I've always been into art, and I've always liked to draw. And I remember I would bring a canvas to one of my jobs, and I would paint on my break. We had like an hour break, and
mhm.
I would paint like acrylics and stuff. And people would be like, "Hey, can you paint me this or can you paint me that?" And
Yeah,
I said, "If what I if you give me an idea that's interesting or a character that I think is interesting, I'll try." Like,
yeah,
but you're asking me to do, a daffodil or,
yeah,
something that I don't really, that's not something that I would even know how to paint. I
yeah,
probably wouldn't do it because I feel
yeah,
like I'm not going to be able to, if I'm not really interested in it, I'm not going to be able to give it like 100% and be really,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? I don't know
Yeah,
if that was
absolutely.
wrong.
That's, I mean, not to discredit anybody wearing those images as tattoos, but a lot of that stuff I I refer to lovingly as like paycheck tattoos.
Mhm.
They're things that I do to pay my bills. They're
Right,
things that I do, you know, just to keep everybody happy. You know,
right,
you
right,
got to have your entire clientele base is not going to be all the same stuff. You know,
right.
and again, that's I also think that that's important in tattooing is to have a variety of abilities.
Mhm.
Um, so I do, you know, I spend most evenings after I get home from work, I draw my tattoos for the next day, and sometimes it's not the coolest stuff, man. It's just stuff that somebody wants.
Yeah. So
But
what's something that like if somebody has an idea, like what's something that really like will light a fire on you? Like you're like, oh shit, I want to draw that
it's
and draw it on you. Like what?
anytime somebody wants, I love doing animals, uh, drawing animals or medieval stuff, or just kind of. I mean, all the stuff that I'm into
Mhm.
is so closely knit to mythics that that's what, you know, anytime people ask me to do wizards and orcs and castles and stuff, that's
Mhm.
awesome. But I also like to draw all the different kinds of animals. I like to draw like the composite style drawings of inanimate objects, you know,
Mhm.
like swords or chalices
Mhm.
or stuff like that is cool.
Yeah.
um, but luckily I get a lot of those requests, so I get to do that kind of stuff a lot.
Mhm. Now, maybe since you're so good at a certain type of style or design, maybe then you become like the fantasy guy or
Yeah, yeah, I got to a point. I don't enjoy tattooing in color, and at one point I stopped offering it. So when I would have a new client come in, I'd be like, I can do this for you, but I don't use color.
Mhm.
And 9 times out of 10, they'd be like, oh, that's fine, you can just do it black and white. And now I don't. You know, I'll still take a handful of random color tattoos that walk into the shop, or you know, old clientele that just have a request.
Mhm.
But as far as like my Instagram goes, I don't promote it. I don't
Mhm.
promote myself as a color tattooer, and that's just it's worked out for me. So when people see my page, they see that it's all in black and white and it's all a certain type of thing. I don't post every tattoo that I make because I don't want people to think that I want to do just anything.
Mhm.
But people don't care. I mean, like people, I don't know if you've ever had to message somebody with instructions. They don't read that,
Right.
you know. So people will look at my work and they're like, "Hey, man, I love your work. I saw your Instagram. I want to get this watercolored rose." And I'm like, "Okay, you know, I don't know why you picked me to do it, but
Right.
yeah, I'll do it."
So your nice guy is like, okay, I'll do it. But
Yeah, again, I got to run a business and you know,
right.
pay my bills. So
Yeah, I get it. I get it. Now,
so
I don't know if this is the right question to ask or if it might be misconstrued or something, but do you feel like the things that you are interested in or that your love to tattoo on people, do you think those come out better than the things that you're like, okay, another dove, okay,
um,
another,
I know
rosary or
I know exactly what you mean by that, and yeah, it's. I mean, there are certain things that when I approach it as art, because it all starts, you know, on my iPad now.
Mhm.
I barely draw on paper anymore, but I, you know, like I put a little bit more love and care into those items because
Mhm.
I'm more passionate about them.
Mhm.
And it's not because I don't care about the other stuff, but
Right.
I don't see usually see past the image when
Mhm.
somebody's like, I want this, and it's not something that pertains to my interests.
Right.
Rarely can I see it looking more interesting than they already presented it to me, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas like when I get to draw, you know, bats or castles or wizards, it's like they tell me to draw a wizard, and I'll ask as many details as, like, you know, do you want him to have a hat or a hood or one of those little caps, or you just long beard, short beard, you know, like all those things matter to me when I'm going to draw it. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of wild because some people are like, I don't know, I just want a wizard. So do whatever you want, you know.
That's kind of cool though, because
I've gotten some cool requests by asking that. There was a period of time I was just doing a wizard like every week, and it was like everybody would try and come up with a new thing. So it was like I did a wizard, and then somebody was like, I want him to have like a black cat with him, or I want this one to be, you know, shooting lightning or have bats or something. And that's just it's fun, you know. It's really fun to get somebody to tell me more, or you know, just, you know, give me more ideas to put in these drawings.
So you would prefer to have a little bit of direction as opposed to just free balling and doing
always.
it yourself?
Always, yeah. Just because it's like my interests are specific to me, and sometimes that's a little bit more left field than a lot of people are requesting. You know,
you want them to be happy too. So
exactly, I don't want them to wear a tattoo that when they go home to mom, they're like, why does he look so dark? Why does he look so mean? You know?
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, did the art and stuff that you worked on, or have you thought about, or have you done anything other than tattoo? Like, have you thought about, you know, doing drawings for something else, like a comic book or anything else? Like,
yeah, all the time. I get to do cool stuff, like, for especially in our group, like the Cabal. I've gotten to do a couple of shirt designs. I'm always willing to do art for, you know, different media. But personally, I've never thought to like write a comic book or throw myself out there to be an artist in that situation, because of how often I draw for a living. I can only have so many things to draw at a time.
Right.
So when somebody's in a time crunch, like a long time ago, I helped somebody out with a book. It was like a kid's book that I don't know that it ever got off the ground, but it was like, she was so, you know, adamant about what things looked like or when she needed to have them by so she could submit for whatever, that it was like, it became a lot less fun and more like a job. But I was also really busy doing my thing. And the artwork she was requesting of me was nothing that I would ever draw.
Yeah.
You know? So it's like, to do tattoos is one thing, and then when I draw like mythic art, it's I would draw that every day, you know, like it's stuff I like. So it's like, it doesn't feel like a job when I'm drawing my tattoos or Mythic Legion stuff or comic book stuff that I enjoy. You know, so, but I have had a couple of people, people will reach out and be like, hey man, do you take commissions? And I'm like, sort of, what do you want? You know?
Yeah, it depends. Yeah.
Because it's like sometimes, sometimes I'm like, I'm not going to have time to design a logo that spells out your name in weird letters, you know, that's a little bit more involved.
Yeah, I get it. I think, you know, when you're you have to, it has to be like something that there has to be some kind of fire, or it has to really appeal to your creativity.
It
can't
definitely
really force, you know.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just thinking out loud, because I know that when people have suggested me to paint something, if it's not something that's interesting to me, it's like work, you know. It's like,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it definitely helps to be to have an interest in the subject matter, for sure.
Yeah. So how did you hear about Mythics? Was it in Toy Fair magazine, or did
I
you see
don't
him at a
know.
shop?
I don't know when I heard about it. Um, but I knew of it. Like I don't remember where I read it or saw it, but I knew that the Four Horsemen. This was after they were doing the Masters of the Universe classic stuff, which I didn't get in on
Mm-hmm.
because at that time period, I think is when I first started tattooing full time, and I was broke, like crazy broke all the time.
Yeah.
So I was getting kind of like side gigs and weird jobs and stuff. So a lot of those toys I didn't buy. The Thundercats stuff that the Four Horsemen sculpted, I picked up as often as I could because I really loved those designs. But when it came to like the Mythic Legion stuff, I didn't have the extra money to put towards a toy line that I wasn't super familiar with or
Right.
following. But that the Adamon and Keltis were the first time I was like, man, I kind of need those,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Um, and I discovered those long after they were released, so I just never ended up picking them up. But um, I didn't buy my first Mythics until 2020, until quarantine, and I think Alithia was still up for pre-order.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I think it was just having that kind of time to myself. You know, I just sitting around in quarantine and just looking at the internet.
Mm-hmm. Was there an aesthetic in that wave, or a certain figure that kind of appealed to you, or a
In
design?
Alithia, actually, Alithia was the reason I looked into Mythics again. Because again, I had seen them. I knew Adamon existed,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I didn't pay super close attention until it was a Varg, the the prototype
Yeah.
that they showed for Varg. I was like, I have to have that. Like he is the coolest toy. Like he just looks like a weird little bat, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
A
and
muscular
then I
bat.
look, yeah, and then I looked at that whole wave, and I was like, dang, these are really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminded me that I was like, I think this is where the He-Man guy came from, the Adamon character. So I looked up
Mm-hmm.
Adamon, and at the time he was like $120,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was like, it was a weird time, man. Quarantine money was spent differently.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
So I was all in on Alithia. I was like, I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
get every figure from this pre-order, and I'm gonna buy that He-Man.
Mm-hmm.
So with that all happening at the same time, I looked at Big Bad Toy Store for that Atamon and saw that there was a bunch of figures available in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up in one shot. I think I ordered Atamon from eBay and then pre-ordered the entire wave of Alithia, and then I bought one of each style of figure from Big Bad Toy Store. So
Mm-hmm.
I think I got Snag, Calros, Hagnon, the Elf Ranger, and I think that's it. I think that was my first order, and then Calros was the first one I opened. And
Mm-hmm.
once I opened that, I was like, "These are the coolest toys I've ever held."
Yes.
You know, like just the way that it felt in hand, it felt like a solid figure.
Mm-hmm.
You
Absolutely.
know, and all the
Yeah.
pieces were cool. The paints were incredible, and that's when I started watching like Toy Bro and Dork Lair reviews.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one by one as I would watch a
Those things are
review.
dangerous.
Oh yeah, I was,
Yeah.
and again at the time, most of those figures were available on Big Bad Toy Store. So I would just watch reviews all night and then decide, okay, tomorrow morning I'm just going to order a Templar and um, you know, whatever other characters are available. And there was a ton. That's how I got like Thistlethorn and Faunus and you know that big set of figures that was up there. I think I got every one of them.
Mm-hmm. Or was there a favorite figure at the time
Uh,
that you really loved above the other ones, or?
I still to this day I love Calros. I think he's a cool
Mhm.
toy. But I think that's because I like the way, it was just my first one.
Mhm.
But it was definitely the 1.0 figures that I liked out of
Mhm.
the whole, what was available then. But Snag is another one I really, really loved.
It's a great
Just
little goblin for sure.
Yeah, just the
That head
aesthetic
sculpt.
of him, and yeah, and his story. Like he's just a neat mismatched figure.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, at the time it was just one by one. Every time I opened one, it was my new favorite,
Yes.
and then I would get a new one, and that was my new favorite. And it was just it was funny because my display changed because I had a whole wall of Black Series figures,
Mhm.
and as I got Mythic figures in, I kind of made like this little 4 foot section for Mythic. And as that kind of grew, I
Mhm.
would take out maybe a couple of the
Like
double
a little bit.
stormtroopers, and yeah, and they
Yeah.
moved over.
Yeah.
I mean, and it it's crazy. I mean, at this point now, 4 years later, that's all my display is
Mhm.
basically Mythic. Um, but and it still happens every wave I get, every figure I open turns into my new favorite.
Yeah. They're
You
like
know?
magic. It's like when you
Yeah.
open it, you're almost shocked at how cool
Hmm.
each figure is. I'm
Yeah.
not a big skeleton guy, but somebody gave me a skeleton and I was like, well, his jaw
Yeah.
opens. Or, look at the articulation on this guy.
Yeah.
Or, the color of armor on Ilgar is just so cool,
And
even if it's
a
not
lot
your
of it,
favorite.
yeah, a lot of it is that it's like the paint applications and sculpt. You could have two of the same builds basically, but the paint is so drastic that they instantly become two different
Mhm.
items. And one day you can look at Ilgar and think he's the coolest skeleton ever, and then pick up Tibius and it's the exact same skeleton,
Right.
even this down to the belt,
Hmm.
with a different head, and you're like, I like Tibius
Yeah,
now.
right. Yeah, same figure, but they
Yeah,
trick us. They trick us.
just a different
It's
head.
magic.
And it actually, when I started customizing, it took me a second to like remember who has what parts
Mhm.
and how many times they repeated, because there was figures that I was like, oh, I need those gloves, and then I realized that I had those gloves with another figure that I used.
Yeah, that's something I really wanted to get into with you is your customizing, because that seems kind of like, besides you being a nice guy, your customizing is your kind of calling card. Um, so when did you start to get that fever or fire to begin customizing? And then I want to show pictures after you
Okay.
answer.
Well, it was also 2020. Um, Again, I went head first into Legions, like almost like obsessively.
Mhm.
That I got into it and then understood it pretty early on, like 1.0, 2.0, what can be removed, what can be replaced, what kind of looks good together. And then also got into the few third party sculptors that were out there. So I ordered some planetary dog stuff, just to try it out, because I had never painted a toy before. Like I had never painted a full size figure, start to finish. So I ordered some planetary dog toys, head sculpts, and it turned out to be way more difficult than I thought it was going to be. So just as obsessive as I got about Mythic Legions, it became that for painting.
Mhm.
So now I was watching YouTube videos on how to paint skin tones and how to paint, hair and 5 o'clock shadows and eyeballs. But what I got from it was learning proper application and then using it to make my customs look like Mythic Legions,
Mhm.
if that makes sense. Like
It does.
a lot of those paint, techniques are very technical and will give you a really neat look for a miniature or a hyper realistic looking toy. But it's like I want all my customs to look like they belong in the toy line.
That's pretty interesting. Like I never really thought about that, but now that you mention it, because I had sent you a message about this figure right here. Let me see. And I was just like, dude, it just blew me away. Like, um, just the paint, the eyes, the tone, everything, the hair is just beautiful to me.
Thank you.
And you saying that, it kind of makes me realize, because there's times, and I'm not bad mouthing other painters or head sculpt, anything like that, but I'll look at a head sculpt and I'll be like, there's something that's not quite right, or it doesn't seem to fit. And I think what that is it's not painted to look like it fits within the Mythic line. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
that may be what it is that bothers me about it.
Yeah, I yeah, and it's, I don't know if I can chalk it up to being like taking kind of the easy route with the way I approach stuff, because I know a lot of those customizers, it's like I don't think I have the patience or even the ability to create something that looks like that.
Mhm.
But my intention when I make customs, specifically for Legion's figures, is to make them look like Legion's figures.
Mhm.
You know.
That's super interesting. I like I said, I don't think I realized um, that that was a thing. I
Yeah.
don't think I realized that, but yeah, that's amazing. Um, let's take a look. We got this fella here. Super cool. I love the soft goods on him.
Thanks, man. Yeah, that was
Amazing.
anytime I do a Masters of the Universe tribute figure, I only use Mythic Legion's parts.
Hmm.
Um, like I don't use third party stuff as often, or as often or at all, as much as I can, um, because it's so impressive to me every time they make a Masters of the Universe tribute that they're all pre-existing parts.
Right. So they're
So
following the rules, so you do too.
yeah, so like that, for example, being Orko, the only thing that doesn't exist in Mythic Legions is that the metal chain and the metal ring on his chest.
Hmm.
But that's just the Red Death soft goods with Swig's loin piece as the mask, and then that's just a Swig underneath it with I think I used, yeah, those are Poxus's wrist armor.
Hmm. Now, is it more of a challenge to only use the Mythic? Do you use Cosmic too, or just Mythic?
Yeah, yeah, that the Buzz Off custom I did is partially cosmic.
Let's take a look at that
Um,
guy. Look at that. Wow. I love the cosmic
yes,
head that you use. That's freaking brilliant, dude.
thanks, man. Yeah, when I approach customs like this, I think it's more fun. Um,
Yeah.
I feel like it's a bit more challenging because I don't want to compromise the sculpts, so I want to use my imagination
Hmm.
as to what you would use if you were, or what the horsemen would use if they were going to make that character.
Hmm.
Um, and it kind of gives you a reason to think way more outside the box than you would have
Yes.
if you were just going to buy a 3D printed bee head. You
Yeah.
know.
It's more of a challenge, and I think it kind of
Mm-hmm.
gets your imagination going. And I think that's. I mean, I don't know you, but I think that you're such a creative person that you like to be challenged and you like to use your creativity whenever you can.
Yeah, I enjoy it. And this line has really nurtured that like creativity. So it's like, I mean, just with the Thrace head, it was like I just wanted to paint Legion's parts to match other Legion's stuff,
Hmm.
you know. And it's a fun way to keep me motivated.
Hmm. Yeah, it evokes creativity within you, kind of
Yeah.
keeps
So like
your creative muscles flexed and strong.
yeah, and it's like when I do like, for example, I sell heads, painted heads at Legion's Con, and in that case, I paint 3D printed heads kind of the way I want them to, and most of the time, I try and make them match existing figures,
Hmm.
um, and I try and make them accessible. Like I paint them to match accessible figures. So like at Legion's Con, you can buy that head, and then usually you can go buy that figure.
Hmm.
Um, and that's totally in, intentional.
Hmm.
But
It's thoughtful too.
every once in a while, I just I'm not I don't feel creative,
Hmm.
and that's when I'll paint a Legion's, like a factory figure,
Hmm.
a different color. You know.
Okay, so that's kind of an easy custom for you. Like
Yeah.
maybe you were more interested in doing the buzz off than a repaint of a factory figure.
Yeah.
Is this
Yeah.
so? This figure right here, this is looks like Lady Verona's chest, or is it
Yeah. It's
her
actually it's I think it's
Delphina?
entirely Lady Alberona, except for the boots and gloves,
Okay.
and then shoulder pads. But I'm working on it. I still have one more to go, but I've done 12 individual relic guards.
Oh my goodness.
So, but
I
most of
love
them,
this one. I if this was sold by the Horseman, I would buy it in a second.
yeah,
I love it.
that was actually a tough one. That cross was not easy to do.
I can imagine. Yeah, because it looks factory painted. I don't know how
Thanks.
they painted in the factory, but that's it looks like it to me.
I imagine they did what I did, which was I masked it
Hmm.
with, like, I bought masking tape that's that width,
Hmm.
and I masked it and I sprayed the white because to brush on white, it was a disaster. I tried it by hand first, and I painted that torso probably 3 times
Did you?
trying to figure it out. Yeah,
That
but
Averona head, that's you repainted.
yeah,
It's not the same skin tone either, is it?
no, you can take the head out of that helmet. So I just took the head out and I repainted the whole thing.
Um, can I ask if I send you a Lady Averona head with money, could you replicate that?
Sure, sure, man.
Okay. Okay.
She's I mean, if
I
you,
love that.
it's funny because I didn't realize it while I was painting it, but it's almost like that head is almost identical to Hadriana,
Hmm.
because Hadriana, like the way I painted it, it looks
Hmm.
exactly like Hadriana. So it's like if you're so inclined, you could just swap out the Hadriana head and it's fine.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's awesome.
Thanks, man.
I want more female knights. I just think they're so damn cool.
Yeah,
Um, so we got to talk about our swigs here. Um, I would say that the goblins right now are really having a huge surge in popularity.
yep,
Um, I think it was, I believe it was Terrence that, I don't know if you
yes,
know Terrence St. John. He
yep,
was the guy, I believe, that had the idea that we should all bring a swig to
yeah,
Legion's Con. And what's funny is that my girlfriend, fiance, just out of the blue one day, she's like, she's in the cabal. She doesn't really know a lot about it just by just what I tell her, and she's kind of an interloper in that, not really knowing what it's about. But it's just out of the
sure.
blue, she's like, "What's a swig?" And I just start laughing, like, "How did you hear about that? Like, how do you know, like, to even ask what a swig is?" So I thought that
yeah.
was hilarious. But
Yeah, that was a cool idea for him to bring up, and I
yeah,
immediately was like, I'll just give him corpse paint is what that face paint is called,
I freaking love it, dude. I love it.
and
Yours is fantastic.
yeah, so I did that immediately after he brought that up. So I was just gonna leave it on a regular swig body,
Hmm.
but I was like, might as well paint the whole thing,
Hmm.
you know. give them. Those are Thrace's soft goods.
Did
So
you dye those or?
no, they're Thrace Wraith Hailer. She has the black soft goods.
I thought it was purple for some reason. I thought hers were purple. I didn't know they were
Yeah,
black.
she has a big purple cape, but her
okay.
waist stuff is black.
Nice.
And then the rest of it, I spray painted black, and then I put a couple of different tones of black on there. There's like a satin one, and then there's like a flat black. So he looks interesting in person. But yeah, it's just a black and silver repaint.
Yeah, I love it, man.
Thanks, man.
I love it. I think it's fantastic, and I'm thinking, like, as I'm working, I'm thinking like, how can I personalize my own swig?
Yeah,
it's fun.
It's going to be fun to see what people come up with. It's going to be a really cool time. I hope a lot of people do it, though.
I do too. I think we need to keep pushing and reminding people, like, hey, grab a swig. They're out there. They're not that expensive. And, do something, So this is something that you drew, right? This is your Lithia. That is so clean. Can I ask what medium that is that you?
That's just on my iPad.
Wow.
All the artwork I've been doing, I do on my iPad, but I am not a great digital artist. Like that. The way that I did that piece is the same way that I draw tattoos. It's just like I just make lines, and then there's the picture.
It's so intricate.
Yeah, that's one cool thing about drawing digital is that, a little mistake here and there, you just tap back,
Yeah.
And you could just
her headpiece. Like if somebody said, hey, you need to draw this, I'd be like, I don't know where to even start, just because her headpiece is so intricate. I can't imagine Eric even beginning to create something like that, let alone.
Right. I think about that every time I get a new figure with a new sculpt. I realize that just the care that goes into each individual sculpt.
Yes.
And I think that you get that a lot when you paint Legion's parts in particular. Like if you paint factory parts, you really get to see what goes into the sculpt and
the intricacies.
Yeah, even the backs of the beards are sculpted. We were talking in Legion's chat on Friday that the trolls have fingerprints.
What?
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't have a troll. I'll have to borrow someone's and take a look. I'll have to look at the palms. I had no idea.
It's crazy the amount of care that goes into these.
I had no idea.
So
yeah, I love how detailed. Like, you are not a lazy artist, dude. I mean, the mushrooms have little, details on them, and his toes, there's shading in his heels. It's like, wow, dude. Like,
thanks, man.
Just super detailed. I mean, crisp, beautiful.
Thanks, dude. Yeah, I think it's all I've done my whole life is draw. Yeah. So it's like to be able to draw, and take my time doing it is that's fun. That's why I'll put tons of detail in it.
Well, I think it's cool though too that this toy line has kind of lit a creative fire in you. You know what I mean? So like, you
absolutely
see these figures and you're like, I want to draw that.
Yep, absolutely.
I think that's cool.
Yeah, this toy line has done so much for me. I've never been part of a group that was so social and welcoming and kind.
Positive, yes.
And on top of that, the creativity in the group is second to none. Like I check the Cabal all the time and constantly am just inspired to do more or do something, different. And I mean, everybody's so wildly creative, whether it's like a pop and swap or a full head to toe custom. I love seeing it,
Yeah, I agree. And I love that people are gracious, and, congratulatory and supportive, of everybody else. You know, you don't see that very often.
Yeah.
But in this community, it's like, man, brother, that is so good. You did such a good job. And, or how did you do that? Or, you know, I want that, you know, can I buy it from you?
Yeah.
You know, it's just like supportive and, you
Yeah.
know, admiring and, you know, but I think that creativity, like it pushes other people to be, you know, more creative, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's and that sort of positive reinforcement goes a long way. You know, I'm trying to I'll try and put it in terms that don't sound super negative. Like, so I've been tattooing for 20 years. And while I have a great clientele, um, and a full-time gig where I can work and I can support myself and a little bit more than that, um, I I'm still kind of nobody in the tattooing world. You know, like I'm just a guy in Tucson. You know, when I go to a convention as a tattooer, I'm just a name, or not even a name in the crowd. I'm just a face in the crowd. Um, but when I got into Legions, it was so that everybody was so supportive that it became like this passion that became, you know, a thing where me and you are chatting online because we want to get to know each other.
Yeah.
You know, and I've been collecting Mythic Legions for 4 years, and here I am, you know.
Right.
And it's entirely due to the support of the community.
Yes.
And the studio, like, it's inspiring. It makes me want to make more figures. It makes me want to draw more characters, you know.
It's like
Yep.
the creativity, it just fuels everybody else.
Yeah,
So
that
it
positive
might,
reinforcement.
yes,
Yeah, it
so it
goes a
might
long
start
way.
with Eric and the studio and the
Yeah.
stuff that they're creating and blowing us away, and
Yeah.
then, you know, like Anthony Hasil, like,
Yeah.
you know, they'll come up with so there's this figure that they just announced, and then he's making something to go along with it. You know, it's like
Immediately. Yeah.
people, it's like getting their creative juices going. You
Yeah. I
know,
want
they're
to get.
feeding off of each other.
Yeah. It's. I can't say enough good things about the creative people in this community. Like, um, the little bit that I do get to walk around during the show at Legions Con, it's just I want to pick up something from everybody, and I want to talk to everybody about their stuff. It's just
Mhm.
it. Everybody's so good at everything there.
Yes,
It's
a
so
lot of
cool.
talent,
Yeah.
a lot of talent, and there's room for everybody. That's what I love too.
Right.
You
I
know,
agree.
there's room for everybody. There's not, you know,
Mm-hmm.
there's no exclusivity. There's
Mm-hmm.
no, you know, boys club kind of thing. Like, everyone is welcome. If you're
Agreed.
positive and creative, and or just, you know, just a fan. Like
Yeah.
I'll hop into the customizing studio, and I might paint something, or I might just be like, what are you working on? What do you
Yeah.
got there? You know, just seeing people's amazing works and being around that is, it's wonderful to see. I love people's art, people's creativity, and seeing what they come up with, and all that. It inspires me, even if I'm not being artistic. It inspires me, and it's interesting.
Yeah. Me too. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've chatted for an hour and almost 10 minutes. It's getting late on my end. I
Cool.
don't want to take up too much of your time. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and I'm, like I said before, I'm honored that you would take time um, to talk to me. I
Yeah.
really
Anytime, man.
appreciate that.
Thank you for having me. Like, it's. I love getting to talk to people about toys and Mythic Legions as often as I can. So it's
Yeah, me
like
too. That's why I'm
this was
doing
a
this.
yeah, this was a welcome evening to look forward to. So I appreciate you
Thank you.
having me, man.
Yeah, you're welcome anytime. I would love to talk to you more about, you know, what fuels you creatively, what stuff you're working on, what stuff you maybe going to bring to Legion's Con. So maybe we can have a part two, and we can delve
Absolutely.
deeper into the mind of David Williams, the mind of the genius of
Absolutely.
David
I will
Williams.
never I will never say no.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you so much. thank you everyone for watching this episode of New to Mythics. Thank you again, David, so much for your time. And I will see you in Legion's chat this Friday, probably. Or
yes, sir.
And the customizing. You're the customizing, aren't you, or no?
I try to make it. So I'm 3 hours. You are too. You're on a different time.
Yeah, I'm Eastern.
Yeah, usually they start it when I'm waking up.
Right.
And by the time I start painting, but no, we're talking like 8:30, 9 a.m. some days that I don't start painting figures till about noon, 1 o'clock, So by that time it's 3, 4 o'clock for everyone else. And
yeah, I know sometimes I if I can get on, I will, but a lot of times it's over before I can get set up and all that stuff. That's why I wish they had like a late night customized studio thing.
And it's because it's cool. It's really fun to just sit. Sometimes we just sit in silence and just everybody's painting, but just knowing that my friends are all there doing the things that I love, it's cool.
I think there should be a 24-hour, always open customizing studio.
Maybe we'll talk to Curtis and see if he'll let us start a late night one.
Yeah. Night Owl Studio.
Yeah.
Hosted by Greg and David.
Sure. Count me in.
Good. All right, my friend. Thank you so much. And I'm gonna send you a Lady Averona head. I already sent you the Thrace.
Okay.
And I'm excited. I will show that off when I get it.
Cool.
And I can't wait to have you back on again, dude. I appreciate you
anytime.
so much.
Thanks again, man.
Remember, friends, to always have fun, be curious, share, and enjoy what this line has to offer. Come for the toys, but stay for the friends. Good night, and thank you very much.